the CPAN session for July. Adrian sends his apologies, actually on annual leave this week. Lucky him in this nice weather. Today we've got Stephen, who's joined us from the NHS, and he's going to talk to us about their NHS Neighbourhood Model, which sounds really exciting. Again, what we'll do is, if anybody got any questions, queries, etc., we'll hopefully field them kind of after Stephen's chat. And then if you want to put it in the chat box, I'll try and keep an eye on the chat box as well, if anybody wants to pop it in there. And again, this is recorded, so we'll send it out with the newsletter and the recording as well for people to follow it up with any colleagues, etc. So yeah, I'll hand straight over to Stephen. I don't know whether you're sharing anything or anything like that, but you should have sharing rights. Any issues, just give me a shout and I'll keep an eye on the chat box for you.
Great. Thank you, Taryn. Great to be here, everyone. My name's Stephen Sandford. I'm the strategic lead for neighbourhood health for the ICB, and I recognise many people's name or faces on the call because I've been very involved with Adrian and the team at Active Lancashire, working to think about the active wellbeing model, as well as all the developmental work that's led up to the support for more co-location of services within leisure services, so health services, working more in partnership. So it's great to see some colleagues that do look familiar here. Can I just ask, in terms of people here today, sorry, just quite a wee bit of background noise there. I don't know if people put themselves on mute. Is that okay? Oh, that's really helpful. Thank you. Just a wee quick hands up. Who's here from the leisure sector? Just physical hands will do. Okay, great. And colleagues from culture or arts and culture? Ah, brilliant. Amy, I don't think we've met, but I have met Janie and Carolyn. I think we've met as well. So good. We've got a mix. Okay. So what I'm going to do, and I guess in the spirit of being a smaller meeting, Darren, I won't speak for too long because I think it's more helpful just to get into some discussion, if that's okay. But I'll give you an overview of the neighbourhood work going on across Lancashire and South Cumbria. And then I guess it'd be helpful just to pose some questions about the widening of involvement of arts, culture and leisure into that space, if that sounds okay. So I'll just share my slides and get these up for you. Okay. Okay, so hopefully they're on your screen now.
Yeah, got them, Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, ChatGPT, for a great infographic. You might recognize a few of these places, including Eric Morecambe on the left-hand side there. There's a very, very small Hode monument as well on the right-hand side. ChatGPT could have made it a bit bigger, but I guess the infographic really gives a view, doesn't it, of how big Lancashire and South Cumbria is in relation to the ICB health system. So that's 5 NHS trusts, lots and lots of primary care networks, around 40 of those. A real interesting mixed picture of geography, both rural and coastal, but also high urban areas, and a commitment to serving the needs of around 1.8 million people and their health needs across Lancashire and South Cumbria. The neighbourhood model has been prompted by lots and lots of recognition that actually the health service is only one part of neighbourhood health. So if you look at the top right hand sort of quadrants of this infographic, you'll see recognition of community services, specialist services, hospitals, and one road leading into residents, or you in the middle. But around that, we have now got a neighbourhood emphasis for the 10-year plan for the NHS, which really focuses on much more collaboration. And the collaboration brings in to partnership our local authorities, our wider sectors, including the faith sector, or the wider VCSFE sector, as they're sometimes referred to, which includes charities, voluntary organisations, social enterprises, community organisations. So I guess the emphasis of neighbourhood health is really the contribution of the health services, but recognising that so many other things help people stay well or help people have life in years that they wouldn't otherwise through traditional or standard NHS services. And I guess that's where the contribution of creative health, but also the role of leisure services in a broader sense of the word, including space, access to green space, what people do in their communities. There's now recognition front and center within the 10-year plan that actually health outcomes are much, much more than happens in a hospital or in a clinic. So coming here today to CPAN is really timely because the 10-year plan has been in existence for almost a year now, and the National Neighbourhood Framework has been in place now since the sort of middle of March. So a lot of things coming together to kind of really support neighbourhood development and neighbourhood health development, where there is recognition that arts, culture and leisure services are integral to all of that work. And I would suggest, or sort of challenge, that I think Lancashire and South Cumbria are making good progress with both of those sectors being recognised for what they can offer in relation to health outcomes for our residents and our populations. So the impact of neighbourhood health, is moving from waiting for crisis to being found earlier and being supported locally and able to live better. So the left shift, as people talk about in human terms, is healthier, less alone, and being supported at home. And we've got one little quote there from one of our priority wards in Rylands from a resident saying, "If Liz, who's a community nurse, hadn't knocked on my door, I don't know where I would have ended up, probably hospital." So something about getting to our residents earlier, upstream as it's called, or left shift, so actually they don't end up in hospital unduly or at a point when actually their needs could have been met more in advance. So quality of life improves when support arrives before people reach crisis. And we've got some really interesting differences now that we can evidence that really draw from Lancashire South Cumbria place studies, which give some really good proof that neighbourhood working is moving care upstream. So Morecambe Bay Respiratory Network has received 55% fewer respiratory outpatient referrals through their work in the community. And we've had 27 fewer emergency admissions for over 65s in Blackburn with Darwin through the frailty model, which I'll talk about as well. So to summarise, a knock at the door before a crisis, a plan before an admission, and confidence before fear. I would suggest certainly for respiratory and for frailty, the role of singing for health is key. And all the work through Lancashire and Song is integral to how we might approach respiratory in a creative way to help people with breathing and social connectedness, which is just as important as breathing through singing. And in the same way, our work through the frailty model is not mutually exclusive to all the work going on in leisure centres around strength conditioning and bespoke ways to offer residents access to gym memberships that help them think about their frailty, vulnerability, and getting ahead with that rather than it ending up with a fall. And then at that point, that's the time when they receive treatment or support. There are some really stark examples of health inequalities across Lancashire and South Cumbria. And when we show this map in the NHS, you may have seen it before. Everyone usually sort of thinks, where do I live and where's my point on the lines here? But certainly for me in Ulverston, as a man, the life expectancy there would be 82, but you only need to go 6 miles up the road to Barrow and realise that actually people have a life expectancy that's much lower. And so the story goes that how we kind of approach people and knock on their doors requires some really active approaches to health delivery. So moving from a sort of passive recipient approach where you receive healthcare either because you know you can and it's free, to something more activating, which is about actually helping our residents feel empowered to take more control of their health needs. And actually our response in partnership to that, to recognising the health inequalities that residents have within their communities, is really, really of paramount importance. Some of those health inequalities linked to a whole range of needs and issues, including what we call indices of multiple deprivation. And in this map of Lancashire and South Cumbria, you'll see the darker spots link towards where primary care networks have really stark disadvantaged health outcomes. And those multiple areas of deprivation linked to housing, they link to access to employment, residents' access to education, health service access, as well as willingness to access health services. A whole range of areas that link to people's health outcomes. And of course, diet, exercise, a sense of belonging and a sense of community all play a part in health outcomes as well. We do have one of the biggest challenges in the country in Blackpool, where, and you'd probably be familiar with some of these stats, but life expectancy for residents in Blackpool is one of the most challenged, if not the most challenged in the UK. And so if you look at the dotted line for males again, you'll see the life expectancy for males over the past number of years. And then underneath that, you'll see the actual life expectancy for Blackpool for males. And the same is similar for females too. So a massive gap, and a gap that's driven by really specific causes of long-term conditions and disease for residents in Blackpool, which largely can be attributed to those multiple areas of deprivation or indices of health deprivation that I just mentioned. So what we can do now, and I guess this is the interesting bit for leisure and arts colleagues on the call, is we can look in real detail at every ward across Lancashire and South Cumbria, and we can hypothesize what the needs of that ward are. So in Blackpool, we can see the darker wards, you know, are where residents live and have a much more specific challenges in relation to their health needs and their health outcomes. So we can target our interventions specifically towards residents living in particular areas. And I guess that's a key issue, isn't it, for actually how we think about campaigns for health related exercise or diet, nutrition, or access to arts and culture that has that has health outcomes. So where are we going with those interventions that helps our residents? And perhaps in some of our work, we do end up going to more leafy green, high affluent areas for some of those types of interventions, because it can feel easier, or they're more receptive to receipt of the types of interventions that CPAN colleagues will provide. There is something about how we work together to think about patients and residents that aren't hard to reach, but find it hard to reach our services. So Blackpool have got a proactive care model, and they have renamed all the ways that they approach supporting residents through a co-production approach, where residents have described what is needed. So instead of what the NHS might call non-clinical case finding, which is how are we finding patients or cases where there isn't a clinical need, residents have described that as help people before they become unwell. We talk a lot in the NHS about outreach clinical models and personalised care, but in conversation, Blackpool residents describe that as leaving no one behind. We talk in the NHS about multidisciplinary team working beyond health and care services, and our residents talk about that as it's more than the NHS. So widening the conversation to think actually your diabetes care or your respiratory care needs or your cardiovascular needs, you know, aren't just to do with the treatment that you receive from your GP. It's more than the NHS. And if it's more than the NHS, what could it be? And what could it be for the CPAN network? And then finally, we have a challenge to help our clinicians feel present, engaged and visible in communities. We often think about district nurses as being the workforce that actually do community-based work, but actually the challenge now to the whole of the NHS workforce is how can you be engaged and visible in your communities, even if you work most of the time in a hospital. And that's something about community stewardship, being involved in the community, both as residents and as professionals too. And that's often about actually how we think about our identity in our communities as um, as residents who contribute to health outcomes, not just the job that we do from 9 to 5. So I just brought along some of our system research emphasis as well, just to finish with. And we do have a research and innovation plan on the page, which directly links to CPAN. We've got a vision, which is improving the lives of people in our community through a collaborative, inclusive, inspirational research culture. We've got priorities for that, which are embedding research and innovation, career pathways development for our clinicians and our professionals, our would-be researchers. We've got a strand on commercial research and innovation as well. But the main one that speaks to CPAN and more involvement now of CPAN in partnership with the ICB would be the emphasis on health creation. And so what we want to do through the research and innovation space in the ICB to help neighbourhood development is think about much more health improvement across the life course, focusing on health inequalities, mental health, children and young people, and then population health and community engagement and partnership with the VCSFE. So I guess what I wanted to bring here today as a question for CPAN was how can we mobilise more research given the ground up work that we have ongoing now through co-location of services, through all the good work with creative health, which is, I would say, burgeoning in Lancashire and South Cumbria because we have so many amazing examples. But how might we increase more of the evidence for that work through a research and innovation approach? And that could be through increasing system bids for translational research. It could be about us as a CPAN group thinking, actually, we've got some really good work going on in our leisure centres, looking at musculoskeletal problems or looking at frailty. What might a combined research approach be for that? And how can we use that research then to evidence more of our work and embed community engagement and co-production through research as well? So just very finally then, health creation is the process through which individuals and community gain a sense of purpose, hope, and maintain control over their lives, or mastery and control over their lives, and immediate environment. When this happens, their health and well-being is enhanced. And I would suggest that in the neighbourhood model, essentially what CPAN are offering the ICB and the system is a real nuanced focus on health creation, which is really exciting now, not least through the work that Active Lancashire and Active Cumbria have been supporting, but also the work through arts, culture, and creative health as well. Thank you. I'll stop sharing there. Happy to take any questions or reflections, comments, challenges, or that was helpful, Stephen, or that wasn't so helpful. I would like to hear more on this or that. So the floor is open for your reflections.
Sorry, could you just very quickly just throw literally 10 seconds on each slide, just throw each slide up again? Would that be okay, please?
Yeah, happy to do that, just to give you a chance to absorb the content. Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, let me just do that.
Stephen, can I just ask, do you usually send the slides out afterwards anyway?
Yeah, happy to do that as well, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of information there, Michael, so I'll just take you back to the start. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
it was. Thanks. Yeah, I did have a question as well, if you don't mind, Stephen. I think, yeah, so sort of like working with and seeing some of the response through the Leading for System Change groups, and there's various different forums across the patch where people are coming together. I think particularly for me, when you see those graphics of like always at the train station type ones where you can see the life expectancy, is there any sort of hopes or expectations as to what kind of change we'd like to see, and by when in those types of statistics?
Yeah, so I think there's a real emphasis, certainly in Blackpool, in how can the collective approach across the neighbourhood model close that gap with regard to life expectancy, Michael. And actually, we did have some news last week that actually Blackpool are not the worst life expectancy in the country anymore. It may be Doncaster. So something is shifting in Blackpool, which reflects something is working. And it's probably a combination of a whole range of approaches that the local authority, local council, and health partners are doing together, as well as with residents, like I mentioned, through a co-produced approach. I think where we can look at those priority wards and focus in on specific areas that link to emphasis on particular diagnostic issues for residents, whether that's respiratory needs or a frailty needs. Those seem to be the big two areas in Lancashire and South Cumbria, which reflect an aging population, as you'll be aware of. But if we are going to close the gap, we cannot leave young people behind, and children as well, and families as a whole group. So the approach to the big challenge that you've described needs to be a real cohesive neighbourhood approach that has that hyper local responsiveness to what it means to grow up on particular streets or in particular communities, and wrap care around it in a very proactive way, as opposed to, like I said, anticipating, expecting patients or residents to receive care when they deem they need it. So I haven't answered your question, but in terms of the challenge, it is the challenge for the ICB, and it is the challenge of the local our local authorities working together. And I could probably send you some after this call, some of the targets that are anticipated over the next 10 years as well.
Well, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you.
I've got a question, Stephen, if you don't mind. My kind of question or query is coming from the health creation kind of angle. So particularly working out there in the communities, lots of third sector organisations like you've talked about in terms of the engagement. And I guess the question is, how would you engage the community in terms of things like sports clubs, arts groups, etc., to really get on board and understand this picture and to get them enthused about the health contribution? Because I think of it, I mean, I run, for example, a table tennis club in a really deprived community, but actually, I would probably say 5% of the participants come from that area, if that makes sense. So again, it's how we can expand some of these programs or encourage some of these programs to engage with their local neighborhoods.
Yeah. So I think if Andy Knox was here, our medical director, he probably know Andy would talk about humility and meeting the community where they're at. And he'd talk a lot about building trust. He'd talk a lot about the time that it takes to engage with the community and empower a community, recognizing that actually sometimes we come in as health professionals, and I can say that for myself, Darren, over the years, with an idea that this is the right way to do this, or you need this from me or from our service, and this is how we're going to give it to you, or this is how we're going to offer that support to you. And I think what we've learned from particular parts of the system, including Healthier Streets in Barrow, or there are many other examples, including the Rylands Estates that I mentioned earlier, is that approach to communities often needs to be done in a very gentle, sensitive way, which holds open the idea that power is going to be shared from the very, very start. And that's, I guess, the principles of co-production, or how health creation happens. As I know you all in the leisure sector are engaged in thinking about too. So there isn't a straight line from A to B in that one, Darren. There's messy engagement, which requires a lot of listening and a lot of careful consideration around what matters to residents. And the NHS, it's not something that we're used to doing because our hospital care is so focused on come and get fixed, or we will tell you what you need. So there's a real shift in the neighbourhood model to think about how things move forward. We had a visit from some colleagues nationally a couple of weeks ago, and we had a nurse present on some of her working in a community, and it was her willingness to unblock a resident's sink that had been blocked for weeks that actually gained the trust of a resident to receive care around their diabetes or their long-term conditions. But her taking on that task was the thing that tipped the balance in terms of trust being created, because actually that's what he needed help with first off. So there's something about how we work together around what we think the priorities are and how we approach communities with compassion, humility, and trust. I think tricky one.
Well, love it. Christian?
Sorry, I muted myself after my loud air conditioning units before. I've got 3 of them pumping at me, I'll be honest. So you mentioned about sport there and well-being. We have got a bit of I don't know, I'm more than happy to share. We're taking over 200 age of a certain demographic members for a bit of social inclusion work to Southport Flower Show later this month, where they've just sort of bought their ticket and we've put on a free coach for them to take them out for a day. Now, it's something I've done with other operators about creating communities and things like that, but I'm more than happy to share the evidence-based stuff that we're doing as far as questionnaires and stuff with that and working with Tamsin. But you mentioned about sport there as well, and just broadly, I'm currently offering walking cricket with Morecambe vets. We do the walking football and the walking netball. Is there any other sort of target markets you feel that we can sort of go after angles wise, or any best practice of other sports that have sort of created them communities within leisure centres as well? That, we have a Nordic walking club that has 30 on it. They're of a demographic. They all sit in the cafe and a secondary spend lines, which I want them to, but it's that community side as well.
Sounds brilliant, Christian. Just sounds brilliant. Everything you've described just sounds like it fits so well with the neighbourhood model. I guess I'd wonder, Christian, have you got any local NHS staff involved in any of those things? Are there any physios on the bus or any other clinicians who are part of the movement?
There's no clinicians. We've got the vicar from Lancaster Hospital is coming with us because he's getting involved in quite a few bits within the centre. We are running Empire Fighting Chance as well, which sort of crosses over with police and NHS colleagues, but unfortunately we're not at the point of supporting our events like that with NHS colleagues. No.
I guess you're essentially doing everything that needs done, but the bridge that perhaps could be built, and it's not your responsibility only, Christian, would be who are the local hospital clinicians who are advocating for what you're doing as prevention, health prevention. So where are the local consultant cardiologists or some of those key people in the trust? Where are they in these groups? Are they contributing? Are they aware of them? Are they happy to kind of say, actually, if we join this visit on the day to the flower show, this would help us reach our community in a way too? So there's something about the fact that you've got a gift there to give to the local hospitals, I think, in all that work.
It's a target market, isn't it? Okay, I can reach out for them. Or if you know anybody that would be interested to come along, maybe.
I think maybe that's the thing I could help with, Christian, is opening the door, because in other parts of the country, the types of activities that you've described are often really visible in the mind of local clinicians because they see it as essentially the left shift happening, and the patients or the residents or the young people that you're offering this support to are the people that they need to engage with or build a bridge with too. So there's I think it's something as simple as as the story reaching the hospital and them recognizing, oh gosh, there's something in this for us as well, because actually this man, Christian, has mobilized all these young people. He's given them a great experience, and they're potentially our customers of the future. How could we collaborate or actually endorse what you're doing in a much more robust way, because it's really, really valuable?
Appreciate it, Stephen. So thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about it. Yeah.
There's a spare ticket if you want to come along.
Thank you, Carol. You've been very patient.
Hi, thanks, Stephen. I mean, I work in Wyre, so just north of Blackpool, and I think sort of similar to what Christian was saying. Really, we struggle. We have really great links in the community, really great links around sport and physical activity. So we definitely have that third sector engagement, but it's the NHS engagement that we've struggled with. So, for example, we have a very elderly population in Wyre. So I've known obviously that falls is a big issue for people here, but I've really struggled to get any engagement from Blackpool teaching hospitals. Now, recently, I have linked up through some work of Active Lancashire with the Allied Health Professionals lead at Blackpool, Nick. So he's been really helpful. And I've been making a little bit of progress around neuro physio through him. But I must have been knocking on the door around falls prevention and frailty for 3, 4, 5 years, and I just can't get any progress. So it's things like that we are ready and able to take groups of patients, but we're just struggling for that clinician and those lead people to engage with us, you know, because I've done this work before, so I know how beneficial it can be. So that's the frustration, I think. And if there's any way you can help with that, I think that would really be great.
Great. So I think there's a wee list emerging in the meeting, which is really helpful. So Christian, there's a link you have with your work in the local NHS. There's the link, Carol, you have with Blackpool Teaching Hospital. So there's 2 actions that we can take away from this meeting. Darren, if you can make a wee log, if that's okay. And we'll just work through them and see where we get to. I'm a real fan of putting the boundary down and pushing against it, you know, because actually then something hopefully happens. I'm glad. I know Nick Lane is very, very supportive of this work too, but it seems like there's a wider conversation around the hospital's awareness of the potential, like you're describing, Carol. Carolyn.
And apologies if this has sort of been covered in previous meetings, because obviously I'm not sure what Heather or Jane has discussed earlier, but are people aware of Lancashire Health Hub is probably the first thing I was going to say. Does that ring a few know? I was just going to say, because that can be a gap as well, and sort of for me, listening to what you're saying now and sort of the connections, I'm actually thinking when Christian was talking about all those things, one of the things we actually want to add on now is where to go for those sorts of things. So I don't know whether you already have a sort of I suppose I was say a directory of where are they together on a site or somewhere if somebody was looking for that in our area where they would look for, because for me sometimes that's the gap. We know they're out there. Social prescribers will often say, well, where are they, you know, what you're doing in libraries, and it is trying to find that gap, isn't it? So I wonder whether from my side whether there's something else we can put on. We're always looking to tweak the site, so I maybe go back to focus group and say, look, I found out a load of more fantastic things that are happening. How can we get that on our website? Because obviously we are just a signposting site. It's not, you know, taking off from anybody. It's more just how can we publicise that more? But also, and again, you might already be all aware, and I might be teaching something that telling you something you already know. But I just wait off to get that book. If anybody has anybody seen that book or seen Daisy Fancourt? So I went to Manchester to a conference a couple of months ago, and Daisy Fancourt apparently is working with the government. So what you were sort of saying now about the creative health industry and that sort of coming more and more and getting leisure involved, and like I say, because you're all from some from leisure industry, and where they did the sports strategy and got the strategy embedded in everything as opposed to just have a sports strategy. That's what they're trying to do with creative health. So it was just, if anybody doesn't know that is what is sort of at the beginning of where the sports strategy was sort of 5 or 6 years ago. So I think that will help us as well. And obviously there's quite a lot of evidence on there. Again, that's not obviously sort of Lancashire based, but I'm just thinking again, we might be able to look at the resources on there and the evidence and reports they've done to actually look at our models to help. You know, Stephen, you were saying how can we code it? Authority, they have done some of that on there. So it might again be, we can look and go, oh, they did that. So actually that's really good or useful for us. So that was just sort of in case you weren't aware of it. That's what's happening, and that's what they're trying to do with creative health now, to get that embedded in everybody's strategies, whether that's schools, libraries, communities, so that it's not on its own. So again, and then the last thing, as a library service, we're just have been told by Public Health from Lancashire Authority that there is some funding available. So Amy, who's also on the call, and Amy's our new health and creative health role person, so why she's here today. So one of Amy's first tasks is to put together from across our sort of cultural services offer for some funding that is coming sort of to the library services for, I suppose, creative health and ideas, but it's only for early years. So where you were saying about how can we gain some of the evidence, they have got dashboards and everything set up. So if we get the funding and if the model goes out, there will already be evidence collected that you could maybe use further down the line that will be open to all. So yeah, it's not a done deal yet by any means, but it's just that's what might be coming in the pipeline that might help you evidence wise.
Brilliant. And it all sounds amazing. So it does. I guess, Karen, we have got one of the largest creative health research studies happening through the Arts for Us project, which you probably know about, which is very rich in terms of Lancashire and South Cumbria input. And Amy, welcome. And if it's helpful to make some time to meet, happy to say hello to you as well. But great to have you with us. Good. Christian, back to you then. Oh, sorry, Michael.
I think Michael had his up before
yeah,
mine. Sorry.
Apologies. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Just a few comments and questions back, but just got a little bit of a discussion on approach to communities, and not necessarily just for you to answer, Stephen, but I guess to the group really. So obviously some of us have got like Pride in Place funding coming in, some of us have got place-based Sport England funding coming in. There's place partnership work through I guess more cultural based and arts based. Obviously all the same communities being targeted, for want of a better word, to feed into this work, and just for others really, because I'm doing some of this work and it's something I'm live looking at now, is like, approach to not fatiguing people with input, and was going to is there a risk of going too far to the I'm thinking about with the Makerfield by-election, which wasn't far from where I live, and everyone was fed up with people asking them questions and all that type of stuff, and how we would sort of have a good approach towards that.
So I think it's a really good point, Michael. There is something really important about the emerging role of health and wellbeing boards overseeing all of this work moving forward. And obviously we've got local government reform happening, and things aren't stable at the minute, are they, in terms of big decisions being made, as well as the ICB reform process too. But I guess hopefully health and wellbeing boards having a mandate for the health and well-being of local communities is where actually a much more considered approach can be taken to the breadth and depth of how we work with communities. Michael, and I think you're right. One of the worst outcomes can be asking people to tell their story over and over and again, and then people become obviously the response to that can be really detrimental to engagement too. So I think while you've got CPAN and you've got the active Lancashire oversight space, which is obviously very inclusive of arts and culture as well, then I think this is the space to kind of think about the continued communication around how residents are being approached and how you're thinking about your partnership working. But I am going to take away from this conversation, the frustrating fact that it seems like the hospital doors aren't open to recognition of this work as yet, even with all the work we've done with partnership workshops and a whole range of people in endorsing the importance of this work. So that seems really, really important. Thanks. Christian.
Sorry, just to follow on some work that I did with my last operator in SLM, Everyone Active. As part of the regional team for them, we delivered a product called U Plus, which was all based around the well-being paradox with a gentleman called Oliver Patrick. I was speaking to Pete Smith on how we sort of do something locally to understand where people are on that well-being paradox. And if no one's ever seen it, I'm born, I start at 100, and when I die, I am 0. And at what point do I hit the NHS service? And at what point do I hit a health preventative service before I hit an health service? So does my score come down from 100 and I be at 70 and I hit one of our leisure centre services, which keeps me from 70, moves me back up to 80 before hitting an NHS service? Or, very similar to me, I found out 3 years ago I'm missing half of my heart. People that know me on the call might know I've only got half a heart, but and I collapsed with 19 blood clots in legs. Now, I've been made well back to a point, but what takes me from NHS discharging me back to being fully well or working towards being well again? I've been discharged, I'm on tablets, I have my physiotherapy or a little bit of information to get me walking again, but I am only at this point of well. How do we then signpost into local authority services to then continue that journey to be well again? Never going to get back to 100, but what is keeping me from regressing back into NHS services and becoming a further cost? So I think that for us within our health vision here, myself and Tamsin and our chief officers here are trying to work with, I think he's a gentleman called Ken Masser, to look at a new health strategy and how we get that preventative well-being model in there. Whether that's loneliness leads me down there, whether that's drink, that's drugs, that's where I live on a postcode. Lots of things can drive me down that number. How are NHS services and wider partnerships dragging us out of the number to make sure we're not hitting frontline services in hospitals and NHS and A&E services, for example?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, Christian, because I guess, you know, speaking as an NHS clinician of many years, I'm not convinced that the 10-year plan instructs NHS clinicians to do prevention, and as well as that, I don't think we've got the capacity to do prevention either, and I don't think we know how to do prevention either as NHS clinicians, because we are trained to treat people with conditions. So I think there's a sort of open conversation happening now around actually, you know, the reality that many NHS clinicians would love to do more prevention work, but actually they simply don't have the time. And they may not actually have the resources or the skills to work with communities in the way that, you know, the CPAN sector does, with the authenticity that's needed to meet with communities. So I think you know, the fact that you're thinking about a health prevention strategy, and there's obviously public health support for that, is really timely. There may be other clinicians who want to challenge me on that. I'm happy to have a conversation with them, knowing that this meeting is being recorded. But I think we do need to think about where our bang for a buck is, you know, given the emphasis that we have in NHS services right now, and the pressure we have on turning the dial on the amount of work that there is in hospitals, and the pressure on clinicians. And I think if we simply say, oh, the NHS needs to do more prevention right now, we miss the opportunity to look at actually the sectors like you've described that actually do have the capacity to do more prevention. But it is for the NHS to listen to that, recognise that, and welcome that, which is maybe the missing link that we're sort of struggling with here.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Steve.
Okay.
So I'm just conscious of time a little bit. We've got about 10 minutes left. Then we'll get any burning final kind of questions or queries or comments for Stephen. I popped a link in the chat to the Moving Communities tool, which Sport England colleagues have recently kind of launched again, and I'm wondering whether a future session at CPAN on the Moving Communities tool by our colleagues from Sport England would be useful. If you think that would be, then feel free to give me and Adrian a shout, and we can get somebody on to show that tool. It's a really useful tool that looks at assets and health information in certain communities. Really good tool to access. Also, another thing, just a comment, we've got, I think in terms of the system is looking at this, and I think, you know, a couple of examples recently where colleagues at Lancashire County Council are opening up day centres from 5 p.m. You know, for community services to come and access free of charge and provide more services and support, you know, in local neighbourhoods. So again, I think things are happening. It's how we capture that and how we, you know, push that for things like community services like wellbeing, physical activity, arts, etc. So again, that is something that I'm aware of that's taking place, and more will be coming out shortly about that. So again, things are happening. It's how we can encourage more of it really within our local systems. Any further comment from anybody? Any final thoughts, Stephen, from you? Who's got a couple of actions for you to take away, and I'll action them with follow-up emails to yourself, Christian and Carol.
Thank you.
That's good. Sounds good. Really good to be here again. Adrian and I are very closely working together with Active Lancashire and South and Cumbria. But thank you for all your support for the leadership work as well as the partnership work around co-location. There's some really good things on the go, and you know, I think we can build on those, particularly through the role of health and wellbeing boards now. And that's, I think, where I really want to signal this work moving forward, is within that space with local elected members and their oversight of neighbourhood development. So that's, I think, the next development. Okay.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stephen. I think we'll kind of wrap it up there. The next CPAN session is on Monday, the 10th of August. That should be in your diary. If anybody has any other colleagues they want to invite to that, feel free to forward that on. The topics to be confirmed, but I will pick that up with Adrian. But I guess last to say, kind of have a great summer, enjoy the weather out there, and hopefully we'll see everybody back on the 10th of August, if not before. And a special thanks to Stephen to coming along and talking around the neighbourhood model, which is really, really interesting. But yeah, thanks everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.